Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's Friday again, and this time it's Parashat Re'eh. Our parasha is jam-packed with mitzvot and preparation for the Jewish people to have as a guideline, as a focus, how to be a Jewish nation in a Jewish land. The Jewish people are about to go into the land of Israel. Moshe Rabbeinu is giving them their final speech, and indeed, we see near the beginning of the parasha, it says, ושמרתם לעשות את כל החוקים ואת המשפטים אשר אנוכי נותן לפניכם היום. And you must keep all of these laws, all of these משפטים, all of these חוקים, all of these guidelines and rules and judgments. אלה החוקים והמשפטים אשר תשמרון לעשות בארץ אשר נתן אדוני אלוהי אבותיך לך לרשתה. These are the guidelines that God gave you so that you will live in the land that God promised your forefathers. Kol hayamim asher atem chayim al ha'adama. All of these, for all of history, this is a preparation how to be a Jewish nation. And fascinatingly, there's a whole bunch of things that we find scattered throughout the parasha, from Shemitah and the laws of finance and Shmitat Ksafim and rebate and loaning on interest and stuff like that. We find Kashrut also appears in the parasha, a repeat from Sefer Vayikra, the end of Parashat Shmini, which animals are kosher, which animals are not kosher. We find the Chagim also repeating at the end of the parasha. It goes through again Pesach, Sukkot, Shavuot. We find a lot of focus in our parasha on Avodah Zarah, on do not be in many ways seduced to worship Avodah Zarah and the idols and the different means of conduct in the land. And I want to take one of these ideas and focus in on them a bit more. And that is a pasuk that appears in our parasha that echoes previous parashiot. In our parasha, it says, make sure, shmor v'shama'ata et kol advarim ha'ele. Keep and listen to all of these things. Asher anochi metzavecha, that I command you, leman yitav lach, so that you will live a good life. Lecha ulevanecha acharecha ad olam, you and your descendants for all time. Ki ta'aseh, because you shall do hatov v'hayashar be'enei Adonai Elohecha, because you will do the good and the straight and the focused in the eyes of God. Now this, for those of you who are tuned in, Hatov v'Hayashar actually appears a few parashiot back, where we have a very similar pasuk, where it says, Shamor tishmerun et mitzvot Adonai Elohechem, keep the mitzvot that God gives you, ve'edotav v'chukotav asher tzivcha, and all of the rules and guidelines, ve'asita hayashar ve'hatov be'inei Adonai, leman yitavlach uvata v'yirashta et haaretz hatova asher nishba Adonai le'avotecha. If you do the yashar vehatov, the straight and the good, be'inei Adonai, in the eyes of God, so that you will have a good life for you and your descendants, and you will actually be able to settle the land and build it properly, and the land that God has promised you and your forefathers. So these two psukim very much are mirroring each other. Hatov v'hayashar, hayashar v'hatov. And beautifully, actually, the Gemara Chazal come along and say that based on this pasuk, the whole book of Dvarim, which can really be summed up in this pasuk, how do we be a good Jewish nation? How do we live a good life that is continuous, that we can pass on to our children, that we can actually have as a nation in our land with stability? How do we achieve that? The answer is Hatov v'hayashar, hayashar v'hatov. Says the Gemara in Masechet Avodah Zarah, v'asit hayashar v'hatov, Tanya. מפני מה נקרא ספר משנה תורה ספר הישר? Why is this whole book of Dvarim called Sefer Hayashar, the book of the straight and the just? משום דכתיב בי, because it says in it, ועשית הישר והטוב בעיני Hashem. Says the Gemara, this sentence gives the whole book of Dvarim its title. The book of do the straight and right thing to do. And indeed, beautifully, if we want to understand what that means, we have to read through the rest of Sefer Dvarim. Sefer Dvarim is full of mitzvot, as we said explicitly. Keep the mitzvot and the edot and the chukim and the mishpatim. These are the way to live a good and just life in the land of Israel. And when we come to our parasha, there's another very famous statement by Chazal, in this case Rabbi Akiva, the very father of Chazal in a way. And he says, Ma'u hatov u'ma'u hayashar. How do we know what is good and what is straight? Rabbi Akiva Omer, hatov be'enei shamayim v'hayashar be'enei adam. Good is in the eyes of heaven, and straight is in the eyes of man. And I think this sentence can really break down the concept of Judaism. What is Judaism's message to the world? What is Judaism's message that we ourselves must embrace? Hatov be'enei shamayim, hayashar be'enei adam. The good is in the eyes of heaven. God determines the parameters of good and evil, of just and unjust. That is in many ways something that we must receive from on high. Yashar, what is the straight, what is the right thing to do? That is very often common sense. That is very often, human intuition, human initiative. Even if it might be according to the books, Yashar, it is not. Even if it might be, legal, human beings are very, very good at recognizing when something is off or when something is right. When something is, that doesn't smell quite right. I know that you might be able to find loopholes within the law. I know that I can't prosecute you for that, but that still makes you a stinker. That still is not yashar. It's not straight. It's not something that humanity recognizes as something good. And if we take all of the mitzvot that exist, the ben adam lechavero, ben adam lemakom, between man and fellow man, between man and God, all of the mitzvot, for example, kashrut that we mentioned in our parasha, all of these things, sometimes we don't necessarily always truly comprehend how they play out in society. If I do eat this bird or if I don't eat this bird, does that really make such a difference in the big scheme of things? In which case, yes, we recognize that sometimes we don't necessarily always understand the different symbolisms, the different things that they work. One of the famous examples given is that most of the birds and the animals that are not kosher, in this case, mentioned in the parasha, are birds that are birds of prey, that dominate, that kill other animals, kill other birds. And the birds that are kosher are birds that do not do those things. And so we do not want to, as they say, you are what you eat. We do not want to eat. We don't want to be birds of prey. That's not something that we believe in. We're not people of prey. We are people of peace. And for example, doves are kosher, most famous kosher bird in the Tanakh, and so on and so forth. Just a small example of some explanations. But even then, we don't always understand Atov B'nei Shamayim. We recognize that God has plans, has understandings that we must try and understand and appreciate, but at the end of the day, it's sometimes beyond us. Hayashar, when it comes to dealing between people, there, for example, most famously, when it comes to money, when it comes to finance, when it comes to actual justice between individuals, there, very much, as the Pasuk says, Hashamayim, Shamayim LaHashem, Va'aretz Natan Livnei Adam. Land, God has given us the understanding to rule on this earth. Meital, you want to come and say hello? Hello. Say Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
So when it comes down to Va'asita Hayashar Va'atov, I think this is a beautiful, beautiful understanding of the message of the Torah that is being given in this parasha. And finally, there's another concept that is learned from Hasita Vayashar Ve'atov, and Rashi very, very famously says, when it comes to Hasita Hayashar Ve'atov, that Vasita Hayashar Ve'atov represents in tradition. This is based on Chazal. Obviously, this is based on the different ideas. Hayashar Ve'atov zo pshara lifnim mishurat adin. This is sometimes going, as we mentioned, above and beyond the letter of the law. One of the messages of Judaism, I think, is the message that we are trying to make the world right. We are trying to make the world fair. as much as we can to bring justice, tzedek, tzedek terdov. And sometimes it could well be that we are working within the letter of the law, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's fair. And one of the messages, Vasita Yashar V'Tov, something that I think we can take into our own life, is we always must recognize the complexity of the human condition, the complexity of social interactions. And even if we feel that it might be tov, we also have to make it yashar. We also have to sometimes sacrifice and go beyond, above and beyond the letter of the law. And I think this is a beautiful message to take for our time now. One of the biggest battles that is being fought with the name of the Torah, the name of the Jewish people, is, are we fighting within the letter of the law when it comes to criminal law, when it comes to legal law of war? Are we keeping the rules, or are we only going by Tov and not by Yashar? And that is something which is being debated at the moment in Israeli society. How are we fighting this war? Are we trying to do the right thing or the fair thing? Is this the right thing? Is this the fair thing? Is this the Tov? Is this the Yashar? And these are things that are very important to discuss. And we see them being discussed already in our parasha, in Parashat and Sefer Dvarim. Shabbat Shalom.